Being great at sales is essential to your business and your career, but you and I both know that the stress of selling and dealing with constant rejection can be an emotional drain. My entire brand, No BS Selling, is based on the belief that professional sales is a skill and not a personality, and that to be better at sales takes constant refinement and a dedication to your craft. This show is for salespeople and entrepreneurs who are committed to improving their sales skills and getting better results, and are sick and tired of the BS game that often happens between buyers and sellers. Welcome to the No BS Sales Podcast, and I'm your host, Walker McKay. I'll help you and your sales team make selling easier, feel less cheesy, and be more lucrative. It's time to change the rules and level the playing field between you and the people you sell to. You're already good, let's be better. Welcome to No BS Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Walker McKay. Today, I'm going to talk about how important it is for your prospects to know what it is you're meeting about. For them to know why, well, how about this? For you to let them know why you're meeting or why you hope to meet. Sounds kind of elementary, but a lot of times we as salespeople, we get the appointment and just say, want to come by and talk to you, or want to come see you, or let's have a cup of coffee, or let's do whatever, I want to take you to lunch. But we don't ever tell them why. And we can waste a hell of a lot of time. So I thought I'd tell a story about me. Years ago, probably 20 years ago now, when I was in the commercial real estate business, I listed a building about 15 miles outside of town. And it was owned by a contractor. And I thought, well, hell, if a contractor owned it before, probably another contractor would want to buy it. And I was probably 24, 25. I'm not even sure I knew what a contractor was. So this is back before Al Gore invented the internet. And so we had what's called a crisscross directory, and we had a business listing, big old fat books you got to flip through. And I looked up contractor in there, and there were 5 million of them. So I started with AAA contracting, and I was going to call through to Triple Z. And finally, I was just going to do that. It was probably going to take a couple of weeks. And anyway, so I started on day 2 of making phone calls. I got to the B's. And I remember this, I got to Bradley Plumbing Company. And so far, nobody wanted to talk to me, or I'd gotten voicemail or gotten hung up on. And I talked to this guy, Paul Bradley. And I said, hey, Paul, Walker McKay. He said, yeah. I said, I got a building about 15 miles outside of town, and I want you to look at it with me. He said, okay, great. I was like, holy shit. So we set a time to meet and a place to meet about 5 miles outside of town. And he got in my car, and we were driving out towards the building, and I handed him my little sales brochure. And he said, what's wrong with the plumbing? I said, shit, nothing I know of. He said, why'd you call me? I said, I want you to buy this building. He said, why in the hell would I want to buy a building way the hell out here? And we both realized that I just wasted a whole bunch of his time, right? Because I wasn't clear. I wanted to show him a building, which in my vernacular meant, I want to see if you want to buy it. And his meant, we'll see if it had some plumbing problems that he as the plumber could fix it. So we're already at cross, right? And I don't know how many times that you've actually done that to somebody else, or how many times, or if that's happened to you. But I can't stress to you how important it is to tell people why you're coming over, why you want a meeting, what you want to talk about. And if you're afraid, if you tell them that they won't take the meeting, you probably shouldn't have the meeting. It's happened to me a couple of times, and it's generally with friends. There's a funny thing about doing business with friends. I'm all about doing business with friends. You just have to treat it the right way. Right? It's if you are friends with somebody and you don't have a business context, but you see them as a prospect, or maybe there's something you can help them with. A lot of times people will just, go to lunch and all of a sudden just spring it on them right after talking about football or kids, and just, hey, you want to buy? And it's really not fair. I've talked about this before in a podcast, that the goal of a friendship should just be the friendship itself, and nothing beyond that. And it's funny because we try and make friends with a lot of people try and make friends with their clients or their customers, which again is fine. If you end up being friends, that's fine, but that shouldn't be the goal. Don't lure somebody into being friends and try and sell them something. build a healthy business relationship instead. That's your goal. So let's go back to managing expectations. If I had been more clear with Mr. Bradley and I had said, Mr. Bradley, I have a building on this road 15 miles outside of town. I don't know if you have any interest in buying it, but it was owned by a contractor before, and I wanted to show it to another contractor who might want to buy it. He might have then said, no, thanks. I don't want to own a building. Why the hell would I own a building right out there? And we could have saved about 3 hours, right? And I probably wouldn't remember his name to this day, but I do. So think about when you are going to meet with somebody and you think this is the closing meeting, right? You think this is the one where you go show up and get a check. Does this ever happen where you think it's the closing meeting and you're going to show up and get a check and you realize in the middle or the end of that meeting that they weren't thinking that was the right course because they need 2 more meetings? Or maybe the opposite's happened. You didn't know this, that maybe you thought it was going to take 4 meetings to close. They were ready after the first one, but you didn't ask. And you kept delaying it to say you got to have another meeting. And they ended up kind of learning what they needed to learn from you, getting interested in looking around for other options, and they bought from somebody else because you thought it took 4 meetings when maybe they would have bought from you at the first or the second. See, we put our own values on stuff. We put our own thing, well, it must take 4 meetings, or it must take this, or it must take that. I think it's important that we tell people, here's my process. Typically what happens is we meet the first time and we talk about X, and we decide whether or not we're going to do this. And then for the second meeting, we're going to come in and we'll discover this, where I want to talk about this, find out what you want to talk about. The other meeting, we'll decide this. But know what it is at each meeting that you're looking for, and let the other person know what it is you're looking for. Because maybe you can save yourself a meeting. Or this thing we call an opening agreement, right? Just an agreement. If I do something for you, you do something for me. And I have this check sheet that I give to my clients. It's a meeting planner. And one of the questions is, what is your goal of the meeting? What's your ideal outcome of this meeting? And so again, you're supposed to think about your meeting ahead of time. Sounds like a novel concept, right? But so think about what you want to have as your ideal outcome. And then the next question is, why does your prospect think you're meeting? And so, and what I mean this to sound like is, if Walker were to pick up the phone and call your prospect and say, hey, Sarah's coming to see you tomorrow at 2. Why are y'all meeting? I'd want the prospect's answer to be very similar to what you said the answer was. That's the way to be transparent and honest and upfront. And if somebody's not ready to have that conversation, you don't have to have the conversation, right? If you call and say, I'd like to talk to you about business, they say, no, I'm not interested in doing that. And you say, okay, fine. Wouldn't you want to know that now? I sure as hell would. I don't like jumping people and surprising people, not in business. So think about a time perhaps when somebody's approached you from a friendship perspective, and the next thing you know, you're a prospect. And how'd that make you feel? And are you doing that to other people? It doesn't have to be just friends. It can be your people you're calling on to, other business people either you've met or you hadn't met. A good thing to think about always is when you call, say, listen, I'd like to have a business conversation with you. I'd like for you and I to have a business conversation. And then the more specific you can be, the better. You okay if we have a business conversation? Sure. I hope when we come over, I could talk about the service that you're currently getting, maybe what you like, what you don't, and then figure out whether or not it makes sense for you and me to be talking about my helping you. Will you be okay with that? I mean, how can you be more upfront than that? How can you be more open than that? Well, maybe you can be, but I think that's a great way just to let people know so they can be prepared for that conversation. So they are prepared for the conversation. I got to tell you, it's happened I can't remember the last time that I said, you okay if we have a business conversation, that somebody said, hell no, I'm not having a business conversation. Most of the time they'll say, sure. One of the things to remember, again, when you're doing business with friends, I had this situation come up today. A client asked me, they said they want to call somebody that they know they play golf with, but they haven't ever done business with them, but they know that they could. And I said, you know, when you call them and say, hey, I know you and I haven't ever talked business before, or we've avoided it for whatever reason, are you open to even having that conversation? Would you be willing to have that with me? And so he made the call, and he called back and said the guy was thrilled. He was happy to have the conversation. He said he didn't want to bring it up to me because he didn't think I wanted to do business with him. So remember, go out there and be curious. Be sincerely curious about why somebody wants to meet with you and why they don't. Be straight up about what your goal is, what you're trying to do, more than sell them. Right? Your goal can't be to sell them. Your goal is to figure out whether or not you're going to be the right fit. And no needs to be the perfectly okay answer. And so when you go to sell friends, you can say, look, I'm going to come talk to you about this. But the moment you get the feeling you don't want my help, you mind just telling me no. We'll move on, change the subject. I promise I'll do the same for you. If once we start talking, I realize maybe it's not going to be the right fit, I'm going to let you know that too. No BS here. The more transparent you can be with your friends about business, the more transparent you can be with your customers and your clients about business, the more transparent you can be with your prospects about business, the better off you'll be, the more time you will save, and the more trusting your relationships will become faster. Been doing some new things here at No BS Sales and McKay Consulting. We're working on some marketing stuff, which is a whole new venue for me. It's kind of it's a whole new arena that I'm learning about, and we'll share more with you guys as I learn more. But I'm starting a couple of new programs, one for entrepreneurs and business owners. And maybe they're the top sales guy in the office or the only sales guy in the office, and they kind of need some direction, need some help figuring out, how do I do this? What's the course I need to follow? How do I figure out my ideal prospects? They're struggling because, you know, they're really good at what they do, but they're struggling calling on people, or don't know how to approach people, or how to price. Or they're not sure, you know, how to adapt themselves to be a salesperson from what they've been doing. I work with people like that all the time to help them, you know, to learn to sell without being salesy, without being a cheese ball. How to go and get the truth and learn the truth and not be pushy. And if it is a deal, we help make a deal. If it's not a deal, we don't. It's no pressure. If you know somebody that needs that kind of help, how about forward this podcast to them, or have them email me, walker@walkermckay.com. We'll set a 20, 30-minute conversation. We'll have a real business conversation, no BS either way, and figure out if I'm somewhere I can help, and figure out if they're the right fit to work with me. If you want to be part of my newsletter, I got this cool newsletter that goes out every Friday that has one of the videos I've been doing. It'll have a copy of the podcast. Also has a couple of articles I've been reading, and has a link to a book list that I recommend, a reading list of books that I recommend to people. If you want to be a part of that, if you will type the letters NOBS, text them to NOBS, right, with no space in the middle, NOBS to the number 66866. Text NOBS, letter 66866. One of the things I appreciate a lot from you guys, I've been getting a fair number of emails, walker@walkermckay.com, from you guys who are listening, from you folks who are listening, and you're telling me what you like about the show or what you learn from it. That's tremendously helpful to me to get some feedback like that. Our listeners, it's awesome, grow every week. We've had just tremendous growth, especially in the last 3 months. So if you're learning something, or you've learned something here and you want to share it, I would love to hear what it is. Also, if there's a topic regarding sales, entrepreneurship, business that you're interested in and want me to expand more or find a guest about, I'd love to find out what that is. Just email me, walker@walkermckay.com. No BS Sales Team, you guys are awesome. I appreciate you very much. If you have not yet rated and reviewed this podcast, please do so. That helps, again, with our SEO, helps spread the message, and share this with other people. I appreciate you. Have a great week. Go get them. You're already good. Let's be better.